I hope I'm visible and audible. If anyone could just tell me if I'm audible.
Yeah, you're audible and visible.
Yeah, cool. Hi everyone, good evening. I know it's a very lazy Saturday. I hope you all have had your cup of coffee and tea, whatever. And so basically, again, three things. First of all, I hope you had a great last event. We took your feedback into consideration, and I passed it on to Irish as well. And second of all, I will be sending the feedback link again after the event. So please fill it up so that you're getting your certificate by when you attend the third event. And also, can we like make this event a bit more interactive? If you have anything, you can definitely speak up because I can see most of you all are from our batch. You guys are second years and a couple of and first years as well. It'll be really nice if you guys speak up. And yeah, I think we'll go ahead with our data event. Yes.
Yeah, hi guys. Um, okay, so I didn't get any queries from except a few. I didn't get any major queries from you guys. So I'm hoping you all have your Flutter installation done, your emulator set up and running. So I'm gonna screen share and um, okay, let's just wait a second. I hope it's visible. Just can someone in the chat
Yep.
say okay. So this is the glimpse of what we would be making today, like a simple to-do app. Uh, so before we do that, we need to start with the basics, obviously. Okay, so first things first, what you need to do is you need to go to your terminal or CMD or whatever Linux client or command line, whatever that you're using. All you have to do is go into some folder. So let's say I'll go into my documents and I can go into, let's say, a folder called JDG, and I can do a Flutter create and whatever the what do we call project name you want to give. So the project name I used was uh, to do app event. So you guys can use whatever you want. Once you run that command, your file structure should look something like this. You should have a .dart tool .idea. So .dart tool are configuration files for the Dart compiler. You almost never have to change that, so you can ignore that. Then .idea are basically your IAD settings. So Flutter gives a by default Android Studio setup in the .idea folder. In some of you guys cases, you would have a folder called .vs code. That is, if you use VS Code a lot and you have some custom settings, it will be in that folder. So those three folders, starting from dot, are not something that we care about. What we care about are the folders following them. So there'll be an Android folder. So if anyone is familiar with native Android development, you would be familiar with the contents of this folder. So there's an app folder which can contain your sources and whatever, like Kotlin sources, your Java sources, all your XML files, and everything. Followed that, you would have a build Gradle. We would be touching this if we reach a point where we can play around with Firebase. We'll be touching the build Gradle files. But let's see. You would also have your Android project, Kagit Ignore, and all those files. So these are everything inside the Android folder are basically your files connected to an Android project. So the reason I'm mentioning that is just to tell you guys that Flutter is not a, a layer on top of whatever you make. Flutter actually compiles your whole code base into a separate Android app, which is inside this Android folder, and a separate iOS app, which is inside the iOS folder. Which, if you are familiar with iOS, you would have a runner and an Xcode project. So you get a full-on Xcode project inside it. And if you're on Mac, you can go ahead and open it in Xcode. Next, you will have a lib folder. This is where all of your Flutter code will lie. We'll get back to this main.dart file. This is the entry point for your project. Apart from that, you'll have a test folder which contains all the widget tests. Unfortunately, today we will not be covering widget testing because that's something you do after you are familiar with making widgets and working with Flutter in general. So we won't be covering tests. Next, you'll be having web. So in case you guys don't know, Flutter comes with Flutter now has Flutter Web as a stable channel feature, so now you can build all your apps on web. A recommendation to everyone whose laptops are not that powerful, like even for me, even though I have a laptop with 8 gigs of RAM and a pretty good processor, once I start building very complex apps, it gets very heavy on my laptop that to run a simulator like this here and a VS Code. So what I usually do is either I would just connect a external iOS Android device or an iOS device and run my apps on that. Or what I can do is use just build a Flutter web project and build all the UI there. The caveat with using Flutter Web is that you cannot test native APIs. So basically, if you are writing an app which dives deep into Android or iOS software layer, OS layer, then you cannot test that on web. But all your UI you can build on web. And even if today we have issues, I would actually go ahead and switch to web and we'll be continuing on web. Next, we have a few more files. We have a git ignore file. This contains all the stuff that you're not supposed to push to git. If you have ever worked with any kind of framework, you would be familiar with this. The contents of this is not that important, so we are probably not going to change this. I'll ignore. Next, we have metadata. This is so Flutter is a very recent project. They started it in 2000. They made it stable in 2018, and ever since they have been changing a lot. So that's why we every Flutter project that you make will come with a file like this. This is the commit, and this is the branch that you need to follow. So if like maybe like a couple of months later you're trying to rebuild this project, there might be a few things in this file in this project that the latest version of Flutter does not support. So to run this project, you can revert back to this exact commit from the stable branch. These are like again advanced stuff, but things that you must know, which will actually help you a lot later on. Actually, it did help me, so that's important. Dot packages, it is just Flutter packages ka local local paths. You don't have to worry a lot about this. PubSpec lock and PubSpec YAML are very important files. PubSpec lock is generated. PubSpec YAML is the file where you'll put all of your version history, all of your dependencies, and all of your assets and stuff. So we would be playing around with this file a lot. Next, we have a README, not that important, and we have IML file, again, not that important. We can ignore these. So, okay. I guess everyone has the same project folder set up and everyone has that open.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did run the code which you said, and it says, yeah, like it's successful, but how do you open this folder in via Virtual Studio?
Visual Studio, do you have the code? Actually, the best way is you can just open Visual Studio code.
Yeah.
And you can go ahead and you should have inside file, you should have a open.
Yeah.
And you can just select the folder wherever you have it. So for me, it's inside to do app event. I can just select that and it will open it up.
No, but I haven't specified where to create. I haven't specified it, right?
So the Flutter project would be in your home directory.
Like in documents or the C program of like the Flutter page.
In the you're in Windows.
Yeah, Windows.
It should be in your C documents, I guess, or wherever your CMD opens up. So you can just open up CMD and check where it is opened, and you can go to that folder and you'll see it. Or what you can do is you can go to VS Code. You can you can do Command Shift P and search for code. There'll be an option called one sec. Yeah, this one, shell command. It says uninstall for me. You should have install. You can do that, and then in your command line, you can just, so the way I open it in your terminal, you can just do a code dot, and it will open up the project.
Like, can I specify it where to make a file?
Yeah. So if you see right now, I'm in I can then CD into wherever I want. So I'll go to documents, and I'll make a new folder called Flutter, then I can go inside that. Oh shit. And there, if I do a Flutter create, it will make the folder inside that. So if I do a Flutter create, hello. So it creates the project inside my documents, then a Flutter folder, and then there's a project. So if you want to make it in a specific place, you need to go there in your CMD and then do a Flutter create.
Oh, okay.
Another option that you have is you can use Android Studio and create a new project from there. So that way you can set the path using UI.
That would be better.
Yeah, you can do that. CMD is a little intuitive, like, okay. Cool. So I hope rest of you guys have it open. We can now, if you guys are using VS Code, you should have a play button here. You can click on this to run the app. If you guys are in Android Studio, on top right hand side somewhere there, you should have a play button. You can press on that and it'll run the app. So I'm going to go ahead and okay, I ran the app. It should run it. Sorry, my internet went a little funny, but can someone confirm again? Like, is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So cool. Let's just wait for this to open up. Okay, so if you guys go ahead and run the app, this is what you should have by default, a simple counter app. Okay, so if you click on this plus button, it'll keep adding, and that's it, basic stuff. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna change this a little bit. First thing first, we're gonna delete the test folder, and now we're gonna go into library main.dart. So there would be a lot of code with a lot of comments here. Let's just remove all of that. Import material. So create a void main, because if you guys remember, void main is the entry point for any Dart file. And inside void main, we can have a run app function which runs an app. That's going to give us an error now because we don't have anything called app. Next step, we create a stateful widget. Of course, we create a class called app, and we do which extends stateless widget and does all this. So an easy way of doing it would be you can just go ahead and write STL, press enter. It should create a stateless app for you guys. So once you do that, it'll give us an error. Okay. What does the error say? Uncut handling missing static target. That's because we need to restart the whole app. Once we do that, we should have a blank screen. Yes. Okay, so this is how you start any app. Now, from your app, from your class called app, which extends a stateless widget. I'll come to what stateless widget is. What we can do is in the build function, we can go ahead and change this into a material app. Material app will have a home, which can have a container with a child of text. So this is what hello world looks like in a Flutter code. So the hello world we did yesterday was hello world in Dart. This is hello world in Flutter. So if you see, there's a lot of boilerplate that we need to add. We need to add a class called app, which is a stateless widget, and it has a constructor, and it has a lot more things, right? So let's break down this code. Void main run app. This is basically main is the function that opens into that is where a Dart file starts. So we have a main function. Inside that, we're calling a function called run app, which is pretty self-explanatory. It runs our app. In that, we pass a class. Now, how is a class an app? So in Flutter, there's a concept called widgets. It is not the home screen widgets in iOS and Android, but it's anything on screen. So on Flutter, anything you see on screen is a widget. But surprisingly, a whole app is also a widget. Okay. So this class called app, which extends a stateless widget, is a stateless widget, which indeed acts as an app. So remember yesterday we did polymorphism. So this is basically polymorphism. Even though it's a this thing is a type app, it extends stateless widget, so it acts as a widget. And since stateless widget is an app, it acts as an app. Make sense? It's a multi-level polymorphic relation. Any issue? Any what do we call, like, doubts or anything up till now? Okay. So that's what this means. Now every app has a function called build, which returns a widget. Again, this word widget is going to come up like in every line, because this returns a widget. Now a material app, even though it says material app, it's again a widget. It has a home attribute, which is again a widget. It has the this widget is called container. Now this widget has a child attribute, which is again a widget. So this is what an app looks like right now. It looks terrible. Let's go ahead and make it better. So Flutter gives us something called scaffold. So if I put a scaffold here and I give it an app bar, which is again an app bar of, let's say, title lower, save this. So now we get something which looks like an app, right? So scaffold is basically a screen for like, as of right now, for the very basics, the way I understood and the way I will make you guys understand is that scaffold is a screen. Now a screen in any app you take has an app bar, a top section, a bottom navigation bar, which we don't have right now, but it comes here, a body part, and a floating action button. So all of these things the scaffold will give us. So if I hover over scaffold, you see it has an app bar, it has a body, it has a floating action button, it has a bottom navigation bar, and it has a drawer. So let's go ahead and fill all of those things. So we already have an app bar. We'll have a body, which is going to have a center and a child of text, which says hello world. Then we can have a floating action button. Uh, If I save this much, now we have an app bar, a body, and a floating action button, which we click on prints hi, right? Pretty simple. Again, if you look at this, if you read this, a lot of it makes sense. So we have a material app that has a scaffold, which we can basically call, which is basically a screen for our understanding. Then we have an app bar, which takes an app bar and has a title of Hello World app that we can see here. Then we have a body, which in its center displays a text called Hello World that we have here. Hello World. Let me just zoom in a little bit so you guys can see in the center we have Hello World. Then we have a floating action button, which again takes a floating action button, which has an icon called add. So we have an icon of add, and which one pressed has a print high, right? We'll do zoomed. Yeah. So that is what happens. So if I click on this button, if I press on this button, it prints a high. Okay, so now all of this is pretty simple. Let's try to replicate the counter app. So how do we do that? What that had was we had something saying the count is and then showing the count. So it had data in a column. How do we make a column? Very simple. We just make something called a column. The column will have children, which will first have a text called let's say let's style it. Let's give this style this text a text style and give it a font size of let's say 24. And let's put another text which shows a count. Let's just default it at 4 for now. Okay. So now all of our text is coming up and it's horizontally centered, but it's not vertically centered. So the way we can fix that is we can give the column a main axis alignment of center. So a column is vertical, a row is horizontal. So for a column, its a main axis is the vertical axis or the y-axis. And for a row, its main axis is the horizontal axis or the x-axis. Whereas for a column, a cross axis would be its perpendicular or x-axis. So now if I go ahead and give it a cross axis alignment of center, nothing will happen. That is because the column is as big as its children. So since the current count is taking this much space, the column is as big as this, but the 4 is centered. The way we can fix that is by making this a little longer. So if I do that, actually that won't help. In axis size of max. That makes sure that the column is column main axis is max, and now we can wrap this inside a container to which we give a height of width and we need to reload the app. Okay, that is weird. Ancestor found the average ancestor. That is weird. Okay, perfect. That works. Okay, never mind. We can fix that later. But the main point of this was how do we show a count and how do we increase it? So first, to show a count, we need to make a variable. So we go ahead and make a int count, and we default as a 0. Now we have that. Is my VS Code messing up? It's just giving me an error. Okay, so now we have something called count, and what we can do is we can instead of showing 4, we can show count dot toString. Let's restart this because we made a new variable, and we should have 0 here. So if I zoom in, we have a 0 here. So we already have a function that we're running when we press this button. So let's go ahead and do a count plus plus. So in theory, if I press this button, the count should increase and we should see it here in the screen, right? Just to show that, I'm gonna print count right after this line. Okay, so every time we press this button, we see the count is increasing. We print, we get a 1, 2, 3, 4 as an output, but we don't see this number increasing. That is because in Flutter, everything is not reactive by default. Make anything reactive in Flutter, we need to add a state to it. So is anyone here familiar with React or React Native or any stateful thing? Okay, I guess no one is. So basically, any app has to be stateful. It has, so when I create this variable, this count is assigned memory by Dart. So Dart has a context of what the value of this is and has an MD of it. But the Flutter app itself does not keep any copy of this number because it doesn't have to show it show that anywhere on the screen. So the Flutter engine doesn't take care of that number. To make this number relevant to the Flutter engine, we need to give state to this widget. Okay, this widget has to be stateful. So what we can do is, I am just going to copy the return part. And we're going to make a stateful widget with, we're going to call it app again. Now let's return our old UI from here. Let's make int count as 0. Let's restart the app. Okay, so now if I click the button, we still don't see any change on the screen. If I zoom in a little bit, we still don't see any change on the screen. Why is that? That is because we did give this widget some state. This widget now has some memory in it, but it is still not saving this number, and it is still not updating this number. All of that is still happening on the Dart engine. Dart as a language is handling that, but Flutter as a framework is not. The reason that happens is because first, we did not initialize any state for it, and second, we're not changing the state for it. Now, I know we are doing a count plus plus, and we did do int count is equal to 0, but again, we did that for Dart. Now, to do that for Flutter, we need to do a init state method. In which we can do count is equal to 0, and we need to override it. And lastly, we need to set the state of it. So we do a set state, and in that we do a count plus plus. Let's restart. And now if I click on the plus button, you can see the value is changing. The reason for that is because, first of all, we initialize, let's go a little up. First of all, using these lines, we initialize some state. We did an init state, that is initialize state for the count variable. And then secondly, if I go down, we did a set state on it. So two step for showing anything that changes on the screen, we need to have two steps. The first step would be initializing a state for the variable, and the second step would be changing the state or setting the state of the variable. This is a very important concept. State itself is a very important concept, not just in Flutter, but a lot more of like, front end UI based stuff. So if you talk about React, that has state. If you talk about native Android development, that has state. Native iOS development, Shift UI has state. So this is a very important concept. I hope you understood. So again, for all of these platforms, when you make a variable by just doing int count is equal to 0, the variable is made and stored in the Dart engine, or in other cases the JavaScript engine or the Swift engine. But it is not carried forward to the UI engine, which in our case is Flutter. To do that, we need to do an init state, and then to react to changes, we need to do a set state. Okay. Everyone cool with that? It is a pretty complex concept, so I hope everyone got it. Any questions? Okay, no one, no questions. Really nice. So, to be honest, that is it about the basics of Flutter. Uh, Now we're going to go ahead and start making our own app. So we can again go ahead, delete this whole app. We can do the basic setup again. We can do a material. Again, we can have a void main. We can do a run app and pass an app. We're going to call our app a to-do app. Let's create a stateful widget. Actually, let's create a stateless widget. Let's call it to-do app. Let's make a material app. Give it a title. To-do app. Let's give it a theme. We'll talk about this a little later. Let's give it a theme theme. Again, we'll talk about this just in a few minutes. Let's give it an initial route slash, and for routes, you can keep this empty. So what is route and routes? So if I go to any web page, let's say I go to github.com. Go to github.com. So this right now is on github.com, the default route. But if I go to team, it should move to /team. But now if I go to enterprise, it moves to /enterprise. So anything after the slash is called route. And all of these are handled by a router. So on a web, these routes are very easily and very clearly visible. But even though we don't have anything like an address bar on Android and iOS apps, they still have routes. So this initial route slash is specifying that initially you have to go to this route. So now I'm going to create a folder called utils. Inside that, I'm going to have a router.dart file. Okay. Did you guys copy this and like, are you guys following along? Is that fine? Is anyone like stuck behind or something? Anyone? You guys cool? Okay, so in that case, I'm going to move along, and we're going to move to a file called router.dart. So again, like I said, everything, be it an app or a website, has routes, and those are handled by something called router. So we have routes here, enterprise and all that stuff, and this is handled by a router. So now we're going to create a router. So the way we're going to do it is it's going to be a function which returns a map of a string versus a widget function which takes a build context of context. Okay, this might seem like a lot to take in, but let's just go on a little slower. So it's a string. Okay. So what does this function mean? What did we have here? We have a map. We have a function called router, which returns a map of string and widget function build context. What is this? So every app, everything, every widget, literally everything on a widget comes with a context. Okay. Context is a pretty complex thing. We'll come back to it as and when we learn new things about it. For now, what you can see, what you can remember is anything to do anything. So basically, context is, let's say, roll number of every widget. So if I want to do anything on the home widget, I need to grab its context and change the value. Okay, we'll get to it a little later, but for now, what you can remember is it's basically name of a widget. So we're going to go create a variable called routes, and we're going to have a slash, which basically has a screen, which has a body of a container with a child of text hello flutter, and close this. And we can have something here. Just take an empty thing, and we return routes. So again, let's look at this routes that we're returning. Now, routes is basically a map with the key as string. We have a slash as key and a function. So remember, yesterday I told you that these things, anything with a parenthesis and a arrow, is called a function, which returns a screen, right? Scaffold is a screen. That screen has a body, container, and a text, right? So what we're going to do now is in our routes, we're going to pass the router. Let's save this. Let's put a semicolon here, and let's restart the app. Okay, so if I zoom in a lot, you'll be able to see there's a hello flutter here, but it is covered by our app bar and stuff. How do we fix that? Really simple. There are two ways. One, we can add an app bar, which we've already seen in the last part. But the second thing is, because these days phones come with these notches, and some of them are foldable, some of them are slidable. That's why Flutter gives us a very interesting thing called safe area. So if I wrap all of my body inside a safe area and I save it, this text, this text should come down. So safe area is a widget which basically helps us in keeping all of our all of its children in a safe area. It's very explanatory. What it says, what it does. I mean, it does what it says. Safe area keeps everything inside a safe area, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to make a splash screen. So what is a splash screen? Like if you open WhatsApp or Facebook, you have 1 second thing where it shows the WhatsApp logo, and then it loads all the contents. So first we're going to create a splash screen. So we're going to have a folder called views. Inside that we can have a splash screen.start. Here we're going to have a stateful widget. We're going to call it splash screen. Let's import material. And I'm going to go to router, copy all of this, Control X, and instead of returning that, we're going to return the slash screen from here. And we can have all of this data inside here, Control V, semicolon, save and reload. So it should make literally no difference. The thing is, instead of writing all of our code here, we wrapped that code inside another widget called splash screen and put that widget here instead of having a function, instead of having all of our code right here. So the next step, we're going to make it in a splash screen. For that, I am going to create another utils file called color theme or theme.dart. Okay. So I have decided a theme for this app. I am going to go ahead and copy paste all the colors there. So you can copy and keep that here. So let me just go to just a second. So I've pasted all the colors that we'll be using in this app. So you can go ahead and copy paste this whole code in a file called theme.dart. So irrespective of you're on Android Studio or VS Code, you should be able to see these colors right on the on your editor itself. So the white is basically white. Gray is a lightish, light shade of gray. We have a light purple, pale purple, purple, yellow, and red. So these are the colors that we're going to play around with in our app. So what I'm going to do is make the background color of our splash screen color theme dot yellow. Save this. So we have a yellow screen. Looks good. Looks fine. A1, any doubt still here? Is A1 able to catch on? I am a little slow because we have a lot to cover, but I'm trying to be as slow and as explanatory as I can be. If anyone has any issues, you can tell me to stop anytime and ask anything. So am I good to go on, or do you guys have something to ask? Okay, guys, can we make it a little interactive? Okay, never mind. So cool. So as of right now, we have a yellow screen with some text on it, which looks hideous. So we're gonna call it something better. Let's go ahead and remove this container, replace it with a column. Let's have children may, let's have a text saying, let's name it to do Flutter. Okay, let's name it to do Flutter. Let's give this text some style. Again, Flutter is very, very self-explanatory. So if I want to give style to a text, we just give it a style and say text style. Okay. Now let's make the font a little better. So we'll go ahead and give it a font size. Let's say 65. Okay, looks good. Now let's go ahead and give it a font weight. Let's give it a font weight of bold. Pretty good. Now let's go ahead and give it a color. It can be color theme dot, let's say, red. Okay, doesn't look that good. So let's change this from red to pale purple. Nah, let's go ahead and make it purple. Nope. Let's make it light purple. Okay. I think pale purple was the best option. Let's go ahead and take that, and we can change it. You guys can do it whatever you want. If you want to change the color, you can go to theme and change these hex values, or we can go ahead and use some default colors, which can be which you can do with colors dot whatever color you want to use. So we can have blue. So blue has these many shades. We have purple, indigo with these many shapes, and light blue, and it comes with all the built-in material colors built in. So I am going to go with color theme dot red, just for the sake of it. Let's make it a little more fancy, and let's make the background color, instead of plain yellow, let's make it a gradient. So I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to wrap my safe area in a container, and to that container we're going to give a decoration. So things like things like gradient and border radius and the border type and all these things come inside decoration. So a container is basically a box. So we can give it box decoration, which takes a gradient, which can be a linear gradient, which begins at uh, alignment dot top top center. Actually, let's make it top right or left, top left, and let's end it at ended at bottom right with some stops. I am going to close this to so that I can format this document. Configuration is there. We can remove these stops. So okay, we begin at top left, we end at bottom right, and we give it colors. So colors is an array. We take it from color theme dot red to color theme dot, let's say, yellow. Let's save it, and okay, that looks crap. That's okay. You can change those values. First, we need to fix this white space. To do that, we can give this container width of media query dot of context dot size dot width. So what is this media query dot of context? If you're familiar with CSS, you would know what media query is. But for everyone, for like in case you don't, it's fine. But for everyone, I'm going to tell you, media query is again not just a Flutter specific thing. It's a front end UI generic, which basically refers to the screen that you are on. So media query is the screen of context. Remember, I told context is the name of the widget. Right now, we have a context passed in. That means this context refers to our current widget. So it will take the screen size of our current widget. We have size from the media query of our current widget. We take the size, and from that we take the width. Okay, that I guess is pretty. I think that made a lot of sense. Now, to make it look a little better, I can replace the colors actually. Yellow to red. Okay, a little better. Let's go ahead and take this column to the center. You can wrap it inside a center widget. Save it. Okay, it's center aligned. Now, like I said before, we can have a main axis alignment, and in the main axis alignment, we can align them to center. So now the our to-do Flutter text comes to the center. This color looks bad, so let's go ahead and change that to purple. Nope. Right. Maybe. Okay. So we have a blank screen with our app name written on it. It'd be really nice if we had a logo. So let's do that. I actually have an image downloaded. Mm, So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder called assets, in which we're going to have another folder called images, and there inside that we can put our image. Okay, so this image is what we're going to use. It's a pretty simple image. You guys can use anything if you want. You guys can download any image as long as it's a PNG or a JPEG. Flutter natively does not support SVGs. So to use SVGs, we have a package called Flutter SVG. That again, if we get time, I would love to explore. But again, it depends on if we get time or not. So to use images in Flutter, it is pretty simple. We can go ahead to image dot asset and then pass in the asset string. So we have it at asset slash images slash to do this dot png. I save this, we're gonna get an error. Okay, what does the error message say? Let's let it go through. Okay, we here have a message saying unable to load asset slash images slash to do list dot png. While we clearly, very clearly have an image in assets slash images slash to do list dot png. Why do we get the error? That is because we stored this image our in our laptops or computers. We never sent it to the what do we call to the phone. The way of doing that is basically going to pubspec.yaml and telling the Flutter engine that, see, on my computer, I have all your assets in this XYZ location. Please, while building the app, take these and put it on the phone. So the way we do that is in your pubspec YAML, there will be a line around 48 or something called assets. We can uncomment this and we can replace this with our path. So that can be assets slash images. Since we want the whole folder, we can do images slash. Save this, go to your terminal and run a flutter pubget. So now this is going to take all of our images and put it on the phone. Even now, if I go ahead and try to reload the page, we'll still get the error. That is because we tried to send new files. We tried to run pubget, but if you remember, I said we are by adding that line there, we are telling the Flutter engine that whenever you build the app, take those files and put it on the phone. The thing is, it did not work because we already have the app built here and running. On saving or on hot reloading, the app is not built again. Only the things that are changed are built again. So what we're going to do is we're going to restart the app and click on this, and this restarts our app. If we do that, voila, we have our image here. It's a little too big. Let's go ahead and fix that situation. We can wrap this image inside a container and give that container some height. A very good practice is putting all of your heights in multiples of media query so that it scales very well across devices. I'm going to keep it 1/3 of the screen size. Save that. Much better. But now the problem is the text and the image is way too close. There are a couple of ways of fixing it. So what we can do is we can change this main axis from center to space between. That moves it to the top and bottom, which in some cases might be good, but in our case looks very weird. We can change that to, let's keep this center, and let's go ahead and add some padding to our text. So we can go ahead and add some padding. So we have a widget called padding. Okay, also the option that I'm getting, if you're in VS Code, you can press Control dot and you will see these options which says wrap inside a widget, wrap inside a center, column, container, and all that stuff. This is very handy. So I wrap it inside a padding. If I save this, we have some space. Let's increase that number by 18. So yeah, now these are very well separated and they look good. One thing that these apps also have is basically a loader which tells the user that we are loading things. We can add that very easily. You can go ahead, do a comma, and first let's put a size box with some height, let's say 270, and then we can have a circular progress indicator or adapter. Take this. So if I zoom in, for me, since I'm running it on iOS, it shows a iOS wala loader. For you guys, it should show a normal Android loader. You can make that something specific by just removing this um, adaptive keyword. And now if I save, okay, my laptop is playing little games with me. It's trying to save. My laptop is lagging a little bit. I'm really sorry. Until that time, if you guys have any doubts up till now or anything, you guys can ask. It'll take some time. Anyone? Wait, let me just restart VS Code. Give me a second. I'm gonna go ahead and run it on web because running an Android simulator and screen sharing is a little too much. So let's move this to web. Okay. Cool, perfect. Let me just put it here. So again, this goes to show that Flutter is very powerful. Like it can run the same thing on Android and on iOS and on web. So we have the same app, similar looking, everything same, running on the web. Okay, so we built a splash screen for our app. Let's go ahead and make it move to some other screen. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make another view called home.dart, which will have a stateful, obviously. Stateful widget showing called to do home. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to go to a router, add a new route at /home, and we're going to call it, we're going to redirect this to the to do home app. What we're going to do next is we want this app to move from our splash screen to us to our home route after we do some logic. But as of right now, we don't have any logic. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a delay and let it move. So let's have a init state. Autocorrect. Yeah. So we're going to create a timer called redirect, which is basically a new. It's going to be like this. Let's make it a late. I'm going to write a bunch of code and then explain what that means. Okay, give me a second. Correct. Dot of context dot push replacement named /home. Okay, so I wrote a lot of code. Let's go ahead and break that down. I created a new variable of class of type timer called redirect. And then what I'm doing is I'm telling it after a duration of 2 seconds, navigator, basically navigate me to a path called /home. Now I did a push replacement name. What that means is it will replace the path. So basically there are two types of pushing, right? One thing is like once you're inside WhatsApp app, you can click on a chat and it goes you inside, takes you inside. If you press back, it takes you back to the list of chats. But once you're on the splash screen, you do not want to go back to the splash screen. You want to kill the app if you go back from that. So replacement, basically what it does it makes sure that if you press back, you don't come back to that home, that same screen again. So that is why we do a push replacement. Navigator.off context, again, navigator, the name is pretty simple. It explains that it is supposed to navigate us from one place to another. And off context is telling it that navigator of this widget. Okay. Context, wherever you use context, as I said, is basically a name for the widget, and off context means off this widget. Next, what we have to do is we have to do a function called disposed to dispose of the state. So cancel. So now if I save this, it takes me to this page. It waits for 2 seconds and takes me to home. And if you see, the back button is not working because I did a push replacement. Instead, if I change this to a push named, I save this and I reload the app, it takes me here. Now the back will work. So if I go ahead and do a back from command line, it should work. Okay, let's go ahead and change that. Let's do a control Z on this, save it and reload, restart the app. Okay, so now we are back to home.dart. Let me go ahead and do the basic stuff. Have a scaffold, give it a body inside the safe area, a child of column, and give it children. Let's say a text. Okay, now if I save this, let's wait for this to save. Loads, it comes here, it goes to home. We have a text called hello world here. Okay, now let's start making it look like what I showed you in the starting of the screen. So what we had there was a header. So let's create a row. Okay, inside the row, we first have a text which will have hello and the name of the person. Let's just say name for now. Let's give it some style. Again, style is text style. And give it let's give it a font size of, let's say, 65 and a font weight of, let's say, font weight or the highest value, that's 900. Save it and we should have hello name. Okay, perfect. Now let's head and make the whole header. What we have next is, if you remember, we had a name here and then we had an icon of the user. So what we can do is, what we can do is, after the text, we can have another child called an icon. Instead, I'm going to make it an icon button. So again, another example of Flutter being very explanatory. If you want the icon to be a button, you make it an icon button. For now, we're just going to print hi on press, and we can replace the icon with an icon widget and do a icon start person. So if I save this, we should have, it is reloading the application for some reason. We should have a button here. So as you see, if I click on it, it prints hi right here. So let's go ahead and make this icon a little bigger. It's too small compared to the name. Again, very simple. You can give a size to the icon and make it, let's say, 35. Let's save. And we have a bigger icon. But right now, they are like stuck to each other, which is weird, right? Icon should be, if you remember, this should be on one side, the name should be on one side, and the icon button should be on the other side. The way we had a main axis alignment on a column, similarly we have a main axis alignment on row, and we do a space between. That takes these two things. Why is it restarting every time? It's just okay. So now it's sent all the way to the side. But the problem with this is it's two on the side and it's covered with a debug. That is okay. We'll remove that once we build it. But it's stuck. It's like on the very edge. To fix that, we can wrap our whole column inside some padding. I usually like this padding to be 10. You can set whatever value you want. So okay, it looks slightly better. What next we can do is we can do a control X on this. We can replace this column with a row. I mean, sorry, that text with a column. Put the first text inside, and we can have another um, text here which says, "Hope you have a very productive day." Okay. This looks something similar to the app. Let's make some more changes. Let's give this a text style as well. Let's give it a text style. Let's give it some font size of, I guess, 25. Let's give it a color of color theme dot pale purple. Much better. Let's align them so that they both start at the starting. That is again very simple. In the column, the way we had a main axis alignment, same way we have a cross axis alignment, which we can give to be start. Perfect. This looks much like what the app we had. But if you think of it, in a similar way, if I put all of my code for the home screen, this one file will become too big. And that is something which is not recommended in Flutter. The biggest reason of that being, if you do that, all of the state comes inside one widget in one file. So the Dart compiler has to handle a lot of memory just with one single thread. So the best way of making complex UI is breaking every single part of your UI into multiple pieces. So this whole row, which has the hello name, this small text, and this icon button, what we're going to do is we're going to control and cut this, create a new file inside a new folder called widgets, and have a file called header.dart. Inside there, we're going to have a stateless widget because this widget does not have any logic, so it does not need any extra memory than what the Dart compiler gives it. We're going to call this as a header. We're going to import material, and we can go ahead and paste this. Shift F, import this one file, save this, add the header here, save this. So even though we changed it to a new file, there's no changes because basically what we did is we took all the code, put it into a new file, and then added this new file here. Now you might think that if we're adding the same thing here, how does that change anything? It changes a lot of things inside on how Flutter works. So now instead of rendering everything on the memory that is allocated to do home, it is now allocating more memory for header and then using it there. So here's the thing: managing a huge chunk of memory at once is much more difficult than managing small amounts of a lot of memory. Like dividing your app is basically like dividing all the processes, and it is much better for the devices that you're using it on. So basically it's good as a developer for you. It makes your app easier while development, and it makes your app much more performant once you build it. Okay, so cool. Next, what we're going to do is I'm going to give this scaffold a background color from a color theme, because that white is slightly different than we have here. So you wouldn't really notice a lot of change, but it is different. So to stick with the design, we're going to go ahead and do that. Okay. Next, what we're going to go do is make uh, a model or a class for our user and a class for our for our to do. So I'm going to create a new folder called models. Inside that, I'm going to create a class called to do dot. Actually, I'm going to create a class called user dot dart. So this is what our data is going to look like. We're going to have a name. We're going to have okay, what else should the user have? Let's go ahead and add an email. It can again be a string. Let's say resh.sharma8@gmail.com. You can have a tel, which is basically a telephone number. So it can be a integer, but we're going to make it a string because we can have country codes like these, and some countries can have spaces. That's a telephone number. Next, we're going to have two lists. One called to do, which will be a list of objects where each object is going to have an ID, because well, we do need that. It's going to be a string ID. We are going to use UUID. Then it's going to have a title, which let's just say is make the Flutter app. Then we're going to have a description. Let's ignore the typos for now because we're going to change this anyways. Uh, Next, we're going to have something called created at. It is going to be a timestamp, so it can be integer. And lastly, we're going to have a priority on how high the priority of this thing is. It's going to be an integer. So I wrote all of this as a JSON, but then I told you guys that we're going to have classes for this. So a very simple way of doing that is basically using an extension called Dart data class generator. What that lets you do is I can just go ahead, select this whole JSON, press Ctrl Shift P, and I get these two options: generate from JSON and generate from class properties. If I click on this first one, it asks me for the class name. I'm going to get user, and then it'll ask me if it should break it into two parts or not. So I'm going to say yes, and there you go. We have two things called to do, and it created a to do as well. So I'm going to move that to do into this folder. Let's go in here. It's imported. Everything's fine. This is causing an error. So I'm going to cause change that with dot, and perfect. So now this gave us a user object which has a string name, a string email, a string tel, and a list of to-dos. Next, what it gave us is a class called to-do, which has a string ID, title, description, created at, and priority. Okay. Apart from that, if you look at these files, it gave us a lot more functions. It gave us a copy with function, which is very useful. So in Dart, direct assignment of objects does not work. So if I do a to do A is equal to B, which is a type of to do, This, even though if okay, wait, let me just create a yeah, this will give me an error. But if I try and do a dot copy with, uh, if I do a dot creator to do A, and if I do a dot copy with and pass B, this works. This gives me an error because I'm putting it randomly, not inside any function. But this is the correct way of doing it. And for that, we need to create a method called copy with, and that handles all of this. Okay. Moving on, there is a to map function, which basically exports all of this class attributes into a map or a JSON, which is very, very important if you're working with some external API. Since we have a to map, we also have a from map. What that does is basically it takes a map or a JSON and it converts that into a to do object. We have a to JSON, similar thing. We have a from JSON, similar thing. We have a to string, which returns us a very well formatted string of this object. We have a boolean, we have an operator override of double equal to. So basically, now we can do a double equal to on two to-dos and it will return if it's correct or if it's wrong. And lastly, we have a getter for hash node for the hash code. One sec. Yeah. Okay. So similar. Let me just discard all changes. One sec. So similarly, we have everything for the user object as well. Now let's go ahead. Let's go to our home.todo. Let's create init state. First, let's create a user type of user. Let me create, and let's make a user. Let's do underscore user is equal to so we need to pass in an email, which can be pretty simple. Iresh.Sharma at sorry. We're gonna give a name, which is Iresh Sharma. We can give. Oh, we don't need an avatar. We can give a tell, which will be and we need to do's, which is going to be an empty array, but we're going to make that now. So inside to do's, now we're going to import we're going to do a very important trick that we learned yesterday, which is list.generate a length of 10, and basically going to create to do's with an ID of, for now, just make it a random string. Title, we can make description. I'm just going to put hi. Random thing, and priority can basically be index. Okay. So what does all of this mean? So basically, now if we have a user object with all of these properties, which we can use inside of our app. Right now, I am creating a random user with my email, name, and all that stuff. But later on, if time permits, we'll be connecting this whole app with Firebase, and we'll be getting all of this data from Firebase. But to make the UI, that is good, and this is good enough. So okay, now the header still says name. We need to change that to name, the user ka name. What we're gonna do is go back to our header, uh, create a new class variable called name. I'm going to make it final. Change this to add final parameters. Make this required. Perfect. So now this is going to give me an error here because it's looking for something which is not given. So we're going to give it a name, and the name can be underscore user dot name works, and it'll still show hello name. It won't show Iresh Sharma or Iresh. That is because in header we have hard coded the word name. Now we're going to go ahead and change that to name dot split of space and use the first index. If I save this, it should show hello Iresh. Okay, split space, my bad. Perfect. It shows hello Iresh. Hope you have a very productive day. Pretty good thing for a to-do app to say. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to create something to help us. We go down in the user class and we create a new getter and get priority, which basically returns to do dot for each to do dot where actually no dot where element dot priority is greater than 7, greater than equal to 7, and dot to list dot length and semicolon. So let's try and break down this whole line. So yesterday we studied that dot where returns us all of the objects where all of the elements of a list where a specific condition is matched, and that specific condition in our case is where the property is greater than 7. So we take all of that result, convert it into a list, and get the length of it. So what I'm going to do now is I am just gonna right after the row, right after the header, I'm going to have a text which shows user dot priority dot to string. If I save this, I should get 3. So let me zoom in a little bit. So you should be able to see 3 because we created 10 to-dos, each of which priority was equal to the index. So we should have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. So in that case, 7, 8, and 9 are the priorities, are the to-dos which, what do we call, satisfy us our condition. So what are we going to do with that? I have a very good idea. We're going to create a row in which we're going to put expanded. What is expanded? I'll tell you. For now, let's just put a container inside of it. We don't need a container actually. Okay, we do. Let's put a container inside it. Let's put a child with a text of hi. Okay, so if we save this, this gives us a hi and a 3. If you see, these are very well, what do we call, separated. Now, if I give these containers, both of these containers, a decoration, box decoration, and give them a color, for now, I'll just give it a color theme dot red. They'll take the full size. Actually, let me change the color of the second one. Let's make this yellow and save it. So half of it will take the red color and half of it will take the yellow color. That is because we make them expanded. So expanded will by default take all the space that it has. So right now inside this row, this can take the whole width of the screen except the padding that we have given. So what it does is it takes the whole screen and subtracts what do we call whatever the rest whole screen, and then it sees that there's another expanded, so even this will try to take the whole screen. So it divides itself into half. So if I go ahead and copy this and put another one of them right after this, it'll divide into three parts. Now they'll equally take three spaces. Another amazing thing about expanded is we can divide how much they need. So the first one can have a flex 1. The second one can have a flex 2, and the last one again can have a flex 1. In that case, the first two will be divided in the ratio of 1 is to 2 is to 1. So see, the middle one is double the size of first two. That is called flex ratios and like dividing them into ratios. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to remove the last one. I am going to give them both flex 1, and let's make them a little better looking. Just a second. Let's give first one instead of a color, instead of a fixed color, let's give it a gradient, linear gradient, which begins at alignment dot top left and ends at alignment dot top right. We don't need stops. Instead, we need colors, which will be color theme dot. You can just unzoom to this, yeah. First one will be light purple. Second one will be pale purple. And the third one will be purple. There's an extra stop, and let's format this document. Okay, there is still an error. This is the error. There's an error somewhere. Okay, there's a comma missing. No. Okay. Yeah, let's format this and let's save it. Also, I would go ahead and give this container some height. Let's give this a height of media query dot of context. Basically, the screen size of this widget, that is the home widget, size, height by 3. Okay, that is too big. Let's make it by 4. That looks much better. Let's go ahead and give this expanded, this container, some padding. Actually, no, let's just wait for that. Let's just make this a little better looking first. So we can give this border, basically border radius, and give it a. So again, if you want to give a border radius, we use a property called border radius, and give it a border radius. There are multiple types of border radius. We're going to use circular and give it past 20 inside it. So okay, this is way too bordered. I don't want that. Let's go ahead and make it back to 10. Okay, this looks much better. Now let's give this container some padding. Mm, okay, hi is in. Let's now go ahead and align this high to the bottom right corner. Okay, that is barely readable. We will change that. First, let's again replace wrap this inside a column. Change this to user.todo.length.toString. Give it some style. And what else? Let's give it some font weight. First font size of I guess 30 and a font weight of I guess bold should work. Save it and let's see how it looks. Okay, it went to the top because this is taking the because it's a column. It's taking the whole height by default. So I'm gonna go ahead and make the main axis alignment as main axis alignment dot end. So it takes the pen to the bottom. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna add another text here, which says number of tasks. And we can go ahead and copy this text style and change it a little bit. Let's make the size of it 15 and instead of bold, let's make it normal. Okay. Again, it's center aligning them. So we should do a cross axis alignment this time to end. This looks much better. I still think the rounds are a little too much. So I'm going to reduce it by, I guess, let's make this 7. It'll be a little less rounded. Perfect. One more thing that I want to do is I want to add a little bit of spacing here. So I can do a sized box. And give it a height of, let's say, 20. Perfect. Now I can go ahead and copy this whole expanded and paste it again. Make some changes like changing this to number of high priority tasks and change this from length to user.priority and change this to a new kind of a linear gradient. Let's make this, I don't know, a little bit of yellow and red. So, what colors do we use? I guess just yellow and red should work. So let me do a yellow. Let's do a red and remove the last color. Save this and perfect. Another thing that we can do is we can add some margin to this container. Add some margin. Save this and perfect. We have some spacing between them and these look pretty good. I would go ahead and increase the font of these numbers a little bit. So let's do that by making these 35, I guess. Okay, they look really good. Now the thing is, if you look at the code here, the code from this expanded and this expanded, 90% of the code is similar except the gradient and the text value that we sent here. String that we sent. So again, from the concept of don't repeat yourself, it's a really bad way of writing code. So what we're going to do is we're going to change these expanded into its own widgets. So let's go ahead and control C this, create a new file in widgets called large info box dot. And again, be a stateless widget because we don't want any memory inside this. Okay. So now what we can do, we need three things. We need the gradient, we need the main text, and we need the secondary text. So let's make those variables. Let's go ahead and make a linear gradient of, let's call it gradient. Then let's make a string called title, or let's call it text, and then a string called secondary text. Let's make all of these finals because we won't be changing them inside this file at least. So let these values can be final. Let's import all of them. Let's make all of these required because null safety. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and import color theme here and change these from the long text that we have here to text, comma, and replace that to secondary text. Let's go ahead and control X the gradient, replace this with gradient. And we don't want color theme here, so you can remove this. Okay, no, we actually don't want them here. So that is cool. Let's go back here and replace this thing with the large info box that we just made. Gradient, we can paste the reading gradient that we have. Text, pretty simple. We replace it with users dot to do dot length, and that can be converted to string. And the secondary text is going to be number of tasks. Let's go ahead and end it with a comma. Replace the second box as well. We can take the linear grade from here. Let's control X that and then replace the whole of second expanded with, again, a large info box. The text as underscore user dot priority dot to string, and the secondary text as high priority text. So now if I save this, our code on the homepage has reduced by almost 100 lines, but our UI would be, yeah, it's a little slow. Our UI would still look the same. Now, the best part of it is I can keep using this box anywhere I want just by replacing these values, and they look exactly the same. So, was everyone able to follow? Is everyone there with me? Can everyone follow? Anyone cool? Okay. Cool. So it's already been 7. We will go ahead and wrap up this. Tomorrow, we'll cover up how to show a list of to-dos, how to style them, how to change them from like like done and undone. We can play around with animations a little bit. Also, right now today, I won't be giving you any link for the code because we still haven't completed the app. Tomorrow, once we're done, I'll be giving you the code for this app itself, which will have some more features. So I'll try, if possible, I'll give you guys the code with Firebase. If not, I'll give you guys the code without Firebase, and then you guys can keep watching it because sooner or later I'll update it to Firebase. So that's about it for today. Anyone has any questions, you can ask. Nitya can give you guys the feedback link and we can wrap up.
Yep. So I'm posting the feedback link in the chat box. So please fill it up. Yep. That's about it.